My friend, there have been moments when you felt it, an unshakable feeling deep inside that you were meant for something greater. If you are hearing this message today, it is not by accident. God has been calling you. You've known for a long time that you are different. While others seem content with simply existing, you have always longed for more. More than just working for money. More than just chasing success. More than just going through the motions of life. Because deep down, something has been pulling you, something has been whispering to your soul, you are chosen. And today, I am going to reveal 7 undeniable signs that prove God has set you apart for a divine purpose. If you recognize these signs in your life, then you need to understand, you are not just another person on this earth. You are part of something far greater. Before we go any further, I want you to do something right now. Subscribe to this channel, stay with me until the end of this message, and comment below, I cannot be apart from God. This is more than just a comment. It is a declaration, a bold statement of faith that says, I belong to Him. Now, let's begin. Sign 1, a deep sense of calling. You have never been able to settle for an ordinary life. There is something inside you that won't let you just blend in. Others may find satisfaction in chasing wealth, status, or comfort. But no matter how much you try to fit into the world's way of thinking, it never satisfies you. Why? Because you were created for something greater. God's word says in Jeremiah 1 verse 5, Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. That means your purpose was determined before you even took your first breath. Before anyone knew your name, God already had a plan for your life. But here's what you need to understand, being chosen does not mean life will be easy. In fact, it means the opposite. Throughout history, every single person God has chosen has faced obstacles, battles, and seasons of struggle. Why? Because God refines those He calls. Look at the story of Joseph. God gave him dreams of greatness. But what happened next? His own brothers betrayed him. He was sold into slavery. He was falsely accused and thrown into prison. To an outsider, it looked like his life was falling apart. But in reality, God was positioning him for his destiny. And the same is happening in your life. The setbacks, the betrayals, the moments of uncertainty, they are not signs of failure. They are signs that God is preparing you. You are not meant to live an ordinary life. You are called to impact lives. To carry God's presence into the world, to fulfill a divine mission. But here's the danger, many people ignore this calling. They drown it out with distractions. They chase after money, success, and comfort, thinking it will fill the emptiness inside. But the truth is, only God's purpose will satisfy your soul. And this is where the first sign becomes clear. If you have felt this deep, unshakable hunger for something greater, it is not random. It is the voice of God pulling you toward your destiny. And the question is, will you listen? Sign 2, you face intense spiritual battles. Listen to me carefully. If you are truly chosen by God, the enemy knows who you are. And the moment you start walking in your divine calling, resistance will come. Attacks, betrayals, unexpected hardships. These are not coincidences. They are evidence that you are dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. Look at Joseph again. When God gave him dreams of ruling over nations, what happened? His own brothers turned against him. He was thrown into a pit. He was sold as a slave. He was falsely accused and imprisoned. It seemed like everything was falling apart. But in reality, God was positioning him for his destiny. And this is what happens to many chosen people. The enemy tries to stop you before you can step into your purpose. The attacks don't just come from strangers. They come from unexpected places, sometimes even from your own family, friends, or people you trusted. You might face rejection. You might be misunderstood. You might be attacked for no reason. But here's the truth: if you were not called for something great, the enemy wouldn't be trying so hard to stop you. Look at Job. He had everything: a family, wealth, success. And then, suddenly, he lost it all. Why? Because the enemy saw his potential and wanted to destroy him. But in the end, God restored him. God gave him back double what he lost. The enemy does not attack those who are not a threat. And if you have faced intense spiritual battles, it is because the enemy sees what you will become. He sees your potential. He knows you are dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. Think about your own life. Have you faced betrayal from people you trusted? Have you walked through financial struggles while trying to do the right thing? Have you experienced seasons of loss, uncertainty, or isolation? If so, do not see it as a curse. See it as confirmation. Because here's what the enemy doesn't want you to know: every battle you have faced is actually preparing you for something greater. Every attack is shaping you, strengthening you, making you into the person God has called you to be. And the key is this: do not give up. Do not let the hardship make you question your purpose. Instead, let it confirm that you are chosen. Because as you begin to see the truth behind your battles, something powerful happens. Your perspective shifts. You stop seeing challenges as obstacles, and start seeing them as training for your destiny. Because the reality is, every great person God has ever chosen has faced intense battles. And if you are facing them now, it is because something incredible is on the other side. What happens next? This is just the beginning. There are still 5 more signs that prove God has chosen you for something great. And in the next part of this message, we will go even deeper. Because once you recognize these signs in your life, you will never look at your journey the same way again. This is not a mistake. You are not here by chance. God has been calling you all along. And the only question is, are you ready to walk in your calling? Comment, I'm ready. Sign 3, intense spiritual battles. Being chosen by God is a great honor, but it is also a great responsibility. And with that responsibility comes opposition. The moment you begin to step into your calling, you will notice something: resistance. It will come in different forms. Sometimes it will come from people around you. Friends who once supported you may suddenly grow distant. Family members may misunderstand you. Co-workers may start treating you differently. Other times, the battle will be internal. Doubt will creep in. Fear will try to paralyze you. The enemy will whisper, "You're not good enough. You can't do this. You're making a mistake." Understand this: these battles are not random. They are proof that you are stepping into something powerful. Look at the life of Joseph. God gave him a dream of greatness, a vision that he would one day lead. But what happened next? Instead of stepping straight into his destiny, he faced betrayal. His own brothers sold him into slavery, false accusations. He was wrongly accused and thrown into prison. Years of waiting, enduring suffering without any sign of when his promise would be fulfilled. To anyone watching from the outside, it looked like God had abandoned him. But in reality, God was positioning him. Every attack, every setback, every painful moment, it was all part of the process. Because when the time was right, Joseph went from the prison to the palace in a single day. This is how God works in the lives of those he chooses. The greater the calling, the greater the battle. If you have faced spiritual battles that seemed overwhelming, If you have walked through betrayal, heartbreak, loss, or seasons of deep struggle, then do not see it as a curse, see it as confirmation, because the enemy does not attack those who are not a threat. The fact that you have been under attack means you are dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. Look at Job. He was a man of great faith, great wealth, and great influence, and then, suddenly, he lost everything: his family, his health, his possessions. The enemy thought he could break him, but in the end, God restored Job and gave him double what he lost. Because when you are chosen, no attack can destroy what God has planned for you. So, if you find yourself in a season of struggle, hear this: your battles are not a sign that God has forgotten you. They are proof that He is preparing you. And just like Joseph, just like Job, your breakthrough is coming. Signs 4. A constant pullback to God. No matter how far you go, no matter how much you try to ignore it, you always feel a pull back to God. This is one of the most undeniable signs that you are chosen. While others can walk away from their faith without a second thought, you cannot. While others can live in sin without feeling any conviction, you feel it deeply, because there is something inside of you that refuses to let go of God. Even in your weakest moments, even in your lowest seasons, something always draws you back. That something is God's hand on your life. Look at David. He was anointed to be king at a young age, yet he made terrible mistakes. He committed adultery, he orchestrated a murder, and yet, he was still called a man after God's own heart. Why? Because even when he fell, he always came back to God. His spirit could not bear to be separated from Him. That is the difference between someone who is merely religious and someone who is truly chosen. Many people sin and feel nothing, but when you are chosen, sin does not satisfy you. You might try to ignore it. You might try to live like everyone else, but something inside you keeps pulling you back. That is because God does not let go of those He has chosen. You have seen this in your own life. The times you tried to follow the crowd, to blend in, to live like everyone else, and yet, it never felt right. The money, the luxuries, the success, it might have felt good for a moment, but it never satisfied, because your soul was created for more. And when God chooses someone, He places His Spirit inside them. That is why you feel conviction when others do not. That is why you feel uncomfortable in places where others feel at home, because you do not belong to the world, you belong to God. And here's the key: this conviction is not condemnation. When God convicts you, it is not to shame you, it is to guide you back to Him. Look at Peter. He denied Jesus 3 times, yet Jesus did not reject him. Instead, Jesus restored him and called him to lead. The enemy wants you to think that your mistakes disqualify you, but in reality, your conviction is proof that you are still called. Because those who are not chosen feel no pull toward God, but you do. You cannot walk away. You may drift, but you will always, always be drawn back, because you are His. Sign 5. Supernatural provision. There have been moments in your life when you thought it was over. You didn't see a way out. You had no resources left. You were at your breaking point. But somehow, God made a way, just when you were about to give up. A door opened, an opportunity appeared, a solution came that you never expected, and you knew, it wasn't luck, it wasn't coincidence, it was divine provision. God has always provided for those He has chosen. Look at Elijah. In 1 Kings 17, there was a severe drought in the land. There was no food, no water, no way to survive. But God sent ravens to bring him bread and meat every morning and evening. And when the brook dried up, God led him to a widow. She had only a handful of flour and a little oil left, just enough for one last meal before she and her son would starve. But when she obeyed God's command to feed Elijah first, her supply never ran out, her flour did not run empty. Her oil never dried up. This is how God works in the lives of those He chooses. Just when it looks like there is no way, He creates one. Think about your own life. Have you ever been in a situation where you had no money, but somehow you made it through? You lost a job, but an unexpected opportunity arrived at the perfect moment. You didn't know what to do, but a door opened right when you needed it. That is not luck. That is God's supernatural provision, because when God calls someone, He provides for them. This doesn't mean life will always be easy. It doesn't mean money will fall from the sky, but it does mean that even in the hardest seasons, God will always make sure you have what you need to keep moving forward. God's provision isn't just about money, it's about direction, protection, and opportunities. Many times, He blocks the wrong path so that you end up where you're supposed to be. He removes toxic people from your life. He closes doors you were begging Him to open, only for you to later realize He was protecting you. He reroutes your steps so that you don't end up where you were never meant to go. Look at Joseph. He was sold into slavery. That looked like loss, but in reality, it positioned him for the palace. He was thrown into prison. That looked like a setback, but that setback put him in the perfect place to meet Pharaoh's servant, who later recommended him for the highest position in Egypt. Every loss was actually God's provision in disguise, and the same is true for you. Sometimes, God's provision doesn't look like a blessing at first. It might look like rejection, hardship, or failure, but when you look back, you will see, every time something went wrong, it eventually led to something better, because God never abandons those He calls. He may allow seasons of testing, but He will always make a way, and those who trust Him, even in uncertainty, always come out stronger, wiser, and more blessed than before. Sign 6. Carrying the burden of others. There is something different about you. While others go through life only focused on their own success, you feel something deeper. You cannot ignore the pain of others. You cannot turn a blind eye to injustice. When you see people struggling, something inside you feels their pain. This is not just a personality trait. This is a divine sign. Look at Nehemiah. He was living in comfort, serving in the palace of the king. He had access to wealth, influence, and privilege. But when he heard that the walls of Jerusalem were broken down, he wept. Nehemiah 1 verse 4 says, "When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven." Why would a man with everything weep over something that didn't directly affect him? Because he was chosen, and those who are chosen carry God's burden for the world. You have probably experienced this in your own life. You feel an urge to help when no one else does. You see beyond the surface. You recognize spiritual battles, hidden pain, and people in need. You can't just walk past suffering and pretend you don't see it. Maybe you have given to someone in need, even when you didn't have much for yourself. Stayed up praying for people who never even knew you were interceding for them. Felt a calling to serve, lead, or fight for something bigger than yourself, even when it made no logical sense. That is the sign of someone who carries God's heart. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace. He had power, privilege, and wealth, but he could not ignore the suffering of his people. He tried to blend in. He tried to live an easy life, but his burden would not let him stay comfortable. Eventually, God called him to lead millions of people out of slavery. When you are chosen, your spirit cannot be at peace while others are suffering. You know that. Money alone does not solve everything. Success is not just about what you gain, it's about what you give. Carrying this burden is not always easy. There will be times when you wonder, why do I feel so much when others don't seem to care? Why does God allow me to see things so clearly while others remain blind? Why can't I just live like everyone else? But understand this, your burden is proof of your calling. God does not place this weight on just anyone. He gives it to those He trusts, to those He has chosen. And if you feel it, then you are part of something far bigger than you realize. God has set you apart. He has given you a heart that feels what He feels. And that is the clearest sign of all, that you were never meant to live an ordinary life. Sign 7. Separation from certain people. One of the hardest things about being chosen is losing people you thought would always be in your life. There have been friendships that ended suddenly, relationships that fell apart without warning, people who were once close to you but are now distant, and maybe you don't understand why. Maybe you've asked, God, why did you take them away? But what if I told you, it wasn't rejection, it was protection? What if I told you, God was separating you, not to punish you, but to prepare you? Look at Moses. He grew up in Pharaoh's palace, surrounded by wealth, power, and privilege. But when God was ready to use him, he pulled Moses away from that life. Moses had to leave behind his status, his connections, and everything familiar before he could step into his calling. Because where God was taking him, Pharaoh's palace couldn't go. And the same is true for you. If you are chosen, you cannot stay connected to people who are not part of your purpose. It doesn't matter how much history you have with them. It doesn't matter how much you love them. It doesn't matter how much you wanted them to stay. If they are not aligned with what God is doing in your life, they will be removed. Sometimes this separation happens in painful ways: betrayal, someone you trusted turns against you, misunderstandings, you grow apart without knowing why, sudden distance, people fade from your life unexpectedly. Other times, it happens slowly. Your values begin to change, your priorities shift, your spiritual growth pulls you in a different direction, and before you know it, certain people no longer fit into your journey. You might have lost people, you might have felt isolated, but hear me, you are not alone. God is not just removing people, he is making space for the right ones. Look at Joseph. His own brothers betrayed him. The very people who should have supported him were the ones who threw him into a pit. But what they meant for evil, God used for good. Because without that betrayal, Joseph would have never ended up in Pharaoh's palace. Some people are not meant to be part of your next season. Some people are not equipped to handle the level of blessing that's coming to you. Keeping them in your life would only slow you down, distract you, or pull you away from your destiny. So if God has removed someone, trust him. One day, you will look back and thank him for every door he closed. Because every time God takes someone out of your life, he is making room for something greater. You have been through things that should have destroyed you. There were moments when you thought you wouldn't make it, times when the pressure was too much, seasons of loss, betrayal, heartbreak. Yet, you are still here. That is not by accident. The enemy has tried everything to stop you. He has attacked your mind, filling you with doubt and fear, your finances, making it seem like you would never get ahead, your relationships, sending people to betray you, hurt you, or abandon you, your peace, trying to drown you in anxiety, depression, or hopelessness. But through it all, God never let you be defeated. Look at Paul. In 2 Corinthians 4 verses 8-9, he says, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." That is the life of someone who is chosen. The attacks come, but they do not win. The storms rage, but they do not break you, because you are not fighting alone. Look at Job. The enemy tried to take everything from him, his family, his wealth, his health. But in the end, God restored him. God gave him back double what he lost. That is what happens when you are chosen. The battle is real, but so is God's protection over your life. You have been through fire, but it did not consume you. You have been through battles, but they did not break you, because God's hand is on your life, and no attack of the enemy can change what he has planned for you. If you are still standing today, it is not because of your strength, it is because God has been holding you up. And if you are still here, that means your story is not over. There is more ahead, more purpose, more victory, more breakthrough. What's ahead is greater than what's behind. Now that you know, what will you do? You cannot ignore what you have just learned. God has been calling you, refining you, separating you, and protecting you, because you are set apart, you are chosen. But being chosen is not just about knowing. It is about acting. Will you step into your purpose, or will you let fear hold you back? Will you embrace God's calling, or will you continue to question it? The time for hesitation is over. The battles you have faced were not just to make you stronger, they were to prepare you for what comes next. So now, the only question left is, are you ready to step into what God has prepared for you?